This video will show you how to go from incredibly low motivation levels to incredibly high motivation levels. People ask me all the time, how am I so motivated? So I thought I'd make a video about it. To be honest, I wasn't always a very motivated person. I actually used to be very unmotivated. I couldn't really do anything other than play video games or watch TV. So it's certainly not some magical gift I was born with. It's something I had to learn and improve over time. So I thought I would share with you everything I've learned, so hopefully you can take some action and become more motivated. Right, so if we want to actually improve motivation, it's helpful to understand what actually is motivation. Fundamentally, all motivation really is a reason for taking an action. That is all motivation is. This is the definition of motivation. So by that definition, you're probably like, okay, I actually technically do have motivation. I'm pretty motivated to watch TV. I'm pretty motivated to eat McDonald's, right? I'm pretty motivated to play video games. So we're not necessarily in the search of motivation by its definition. We're more in the search of motivation that's moving us towards our goals. We want more reasons to take actions that move us towards our goals. So for example, if you're trying to build an online business, then you want more reasons for you to take the actions that are going to build and grow your online business. If you're trying to run a marathon, then you need more reasons to take actions that are going to allow you to run a marathon. So it's important that we understand what actually is motivation, because that's going to help set the foundations for this video for understanding what we're doing. But yeah, fundamentally, motivation is just a reason for taking an action. So we're looking specifically at reasons to take actions that are going to move us towards our goals. So there are three things that are going to influence your motivation. The first one is actually going to be your energy levels. So if we have two people here, the first guy, right, he's pretty happy, he's had a good night's sleep, his energy levels are up, he's up and about, he's doing his thing. He's probably going to be reasonably motivated as he is right now. Let's say this second person, they're not feeling so good, like let's say they didn't get beaten up. These are just, bags under their eyelids. They're a little bit tired. They're a little bit lethargic. This person by default is going to be less motivated than this person simply because they have less overall energy. So this is going to be the first variable that will influence how motivated you are, and that is your energy levels. The second thing that will influence your motivation is the alternatives that you have. So this is your task. This is what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the work done, right? That's what you're trying to do. But your alternatives are, watching TV. You get to watch Breaking Bad, or you get to play your PlayStation, or you get to, watch TikTok. You get to watch Family Guy clips with Subway Surfers in the background, right? You have a lot of good alternatives. You have a lot of alternatives that are better than what you're currently doing. So, of course, if you have a lot of alternatives that are more enticing than the thing that you're trying to do, then it's probably going to be more difficult for you to be motivated. So that is the second variable, and that is the alternatives that you have. The third variable that is going to influence your motivation levels is dopamine. Now you're probably thinking, what are you doing with the rat and cheese on this board here? Well, they did a study where they effectively severed nerves in the brains of lab rats where they would produce zero dopamine. So these rats would have zero dopamine. They would put them in a cage and they would put some sort of food, I'm representing the food as cheese here, at the other side of the cage. What would happen is the rats would not cross the cage to eat the food. Because they had zero dopamine, they had no motivation. And because they had no motivation, they wouldn't even cross the cage to eat this piece of cheese. So what would actually happen is, unless the scientists hand-fed those rats, they would not eat anything and they would just die of starvation. So at the basic level, you need a certain level of dopamine to have motivation. So the more dopamine you have, the more motivation you're going to have. So that's a little overview of what dopamine is exactly. Remember, it's a reason for you to take an action. It's going to be influenced by the energy you have, the alternatives that are available, and the dopamine that you have. So let's look at those variables in more detail. The first thing that we're going to look at is energy levels. And there's a few things that are going to influence your energy levels. The first thing, of course, is going to be sleep. You see a lot of people that they're trying to be heroes, right? They're going to be crazy entrepreneurs, right? They're trying to grow their business and they get no sleep. They don't sleep at all. They just work, 16, 18 hours a day, and they end up getting basically no sleep. And what happens is, sure, they get a lot of work done the first day, but they start getting really tired. And what happens when you're not tired? Well, you're going to be less motivated. And what happens if you're less motivated? You're less likely to do the work. So while on that day, sure, you got more work done, but overall, because you're fatigued, because you're tired, you're less motivated and you're going to get less work done. So having quality sleep is very, very important. You see, the biggest entrepreneurs, like the people who are making the big bucks, like a lot of these guys actually value sleep quite a lot. Like the guys at the very top are not sleeping 4 hours a night, right? They're getting like 8 hours, okay? Sure, for a small period, for a month or so, they might have gone crazy on the sleep, but there's no longevity in that. You need to get proper sleep because it's going to allow you to have proper energy levels. If you're looking for longevity, which you should be, because it's not necessarily about how much you get done in the next week, it's more about what you can do in the next year or the next decade. If you look at it over a longer time frame, getting sleep is very, very important. The next thing is nutrition. If you think about the food that you're eating, it is going to very much influence your energy levels. So you wake up in the morning and you have, a baseline energy level, right? Let's say it's here. And then when you eat food, let's say you eat like processed food, you eat like a McDonald's or something. What's going to happen is you're going to get a huge spike of energy, but you're going to crash hard, right? You're going to crash really hard and your energy level is just going to be a little lower. And if you keep doing this throughout the day, your energy levels are just going to be very, very, very low. And by the time you sleep, you're going to basically just be so fatigued you don't want to do anything. And if rather than having these huge peaks and then followed by troughs and then feeling kind of terrible throughout the day, if you focus on your nutrition and you are having, a pretty balanced, healthy diet, then you might get little spikes and little troughs, but it would come back and it would be pretty balanced throughout the day, right? You're not going to have huge spikes and huge crashes. If you've ever had like a fat McDonald's meal, right? You've had like 2 double quarter pounders and chips and all this stuff. I've definitely done that before. You feel really amazing when you're eating it, and then you stop and you feel terrible. And like, good luck trying to do anything after that. I remember actually only a few days ago, I went out for lunch for my brother's birthday. And we had we had fish and chips and we had burgers. We had all this processed food really. And at the end of it, my brother had a coffee, and we were just thinking like, no matter how much energy you're getting from that coffee, because of the food you ate, you're gonna be so tired. And guess what happened? He ended up falling asleep like an hour later, regardless of the fact that he had coffee. Because of the nutrition he was eating, you're going to lose a lot of energy. And if you're losing this energy, it is going to influence your motivation. So eat proper nutrition. I'd really just focus on eating a lot of whole foods. Like, don't eat a lot of processed foods. That's the big one, really. Like, we can go into all the specifics about how to eat properly. But at the end of the day, if you're cutting out your whole foods, if you're keeping whole foods, if you're cutting out processed foods, that's going to get you most of the way there. The next one is exercise. I'm not sure why I have these people here. They can go. Bye-bye. Exercise is very, very important. Whilst exercise in the short term might reduce your energy levels, so let's say I just went out for a run. After going for that run, I'm going to have less energy, right? Because I've just had a run. I've just lost all that energy that I previously had. But over the long term, what's going to happen is I'm going to improve my fitness. I'm going to improve my cardiovascular health. I'm going to feel a little bit better, and it's going to improve my energy levels. So it's kind of one of those trade-offs where in the short term, you're going to have a little bit less energy, but in the long term, you're going to have a lot more. So prioritizing exercise, try and move your body at least once a day. That's going to definitely help your motivation levels. For me, I try and exercise every day. I'll do 4 weightlifting sessions a week and 3 cardio sessions. That'll do it for me. Whatever you're doing, just move. Just move a little bit, get some exercise in. It also just clears out your brain a bit. It's a very good idea. Let's talk about stimulants. A lot of people take a lot of stimulants, so caffeine, some people are chewing nicotine gum, and I've done all those things, right? You feel very, very good while you're taking it, but then you get that crash. And what I've done recently is I've removed caffeine completely. And the reason being is whilst you get like a good, you start your day here and you get a spike, and that'll last you a fair bit of time, but you crash pretty hard and you're not really returning to that baseline. And what some people will do is they'll just, take caffeine again. So let's say like you crash there and then you boom, caffeine again. But you can only do this for so long. Like you can't be really drinking coffee after let's say you go to bed at 10. You can't be drinking coffee after 4 p.m. without impacting your sleep. Like, there's a knock-on effect. And what I noticed, I eliminated caffeine about 2 weeks ago, and I genuinely had withdrawals. Like, I'd only been drinking caffeine for 2 weeks. I was doing maybe 1 or 2 cups a day. But when I stopped, zero energy. I felt absolutely horrendous. Terrible, terrible. And all of that was from the stimulants. You're almost borrowing energy from the future. Your energy is generally a net zero when it comes to stimulants. Like, you're not increasing your energy or decreasing your energy. You're just bringing energy forward from the future. If you really want to increase your actual energy levels, get better sleep, improve your nutrition, and exercise more, stimulants are really just borrowing energy from the future. I would not recommend you do this at all. The reason I cut out the stimulants was I would rather look like this throughout the day, just a stable stream, like not too high, than start my day like this, get a big peak, but then like crash to zero, and then have to stimulate again and then ruin my sleep, and then I start the day down here. Like, I'd rather just be steady throughout the day. I would rather be stable and balanced than have these big peaks and big troughs. Do it however you want, but I would start to see stimulants as bringing energy from the future. And if you see it like that, you probably realize, not such a good idea. Right. So the next thing we need to talk about is distractions and dopamine, the other two things that are going to influence your motivation levels. So you're trying to get work done, right? If the alternatives that you have in your environment for doing work is, watching TV, watching Breaking Bad, or playing PlayStation, or watching TikTok, scrolling your phone, however it is that you like to, entertain yourself. If you have a huge amount of alternatives, this work becomes a lot more difficult. You're not really going to want to do this work as much. However, if your work is the only option that you have, it's like, oh, what have I done there? It is the only thing in your environment, then you're much more likely to do it. If I said to you, okay, you have to sit down in a room, it's going to be completely just white walls, just blank, nothing there. There's going to be nothing but a laptop in front of you. For the next hour, you can either do the work or you can do nothing. After like 3 minutes, no matter how much you hate doing the work, you're going to think, this is actually more fun than doing nothing. I'm going to do the work. However, if I locked you in a room and said, okay, you should probably be doing work right now, but I have a TV in the background playing Breaking Bad. It's also plugged into a PlayStation which you get a hold to. You also have your phone right next to you, buzzing all the time. How likely are you to do the work? Probably a lot less. And it's because you have so many great alternatives to doing what you're supposed to be doing. So no wonder you're going to distract yourself when you have so many things in your environment that you perceive as better than what you're currently doing. And the way that we should look at it is like this. This is historically how you would receive your dopamine. You would do an activity and there would be a certain amount of effort that was required to do that activity. And generally, based on the amount of effort that you put out to do an activity is the amount of dopamine that you would get. So for example, let's say that you just killed an animal to feed your family, right? That would be like a very, very high effort activity to do. And as a consequence, you would receive a lot of dopamine for doing that. Whereas, if you were just like sitting around the campfire telling jokes, like, okay, this doesn't really take a lot of effort. You're not going to get a whole lot of dopamine for doing that. What's happened now is that we have access to entertainment that puts us here. It's effectively no effort, and it produces a crazy amount of dopamine. Think about things like scrolling TikTok. How much effort is it for you to scroll TikTok? Well, you have to put your hand in your pocket, you have to pull your phone out, and you have to start scrolling. Not a very difficult thing to do. Same with, watching porn, same with binge watching TV series. All of these things, all of these alternatives that you have are up here, producing an amazing amount of dopamine, making you feel great, but effectively zero effort. And you might be thinking, well, cool, that sounds like a really good idea. I'll just do that because I'll feel great and it doesn't take much effort. The problem is, none of these things are moving you towards your goals. Like, how is watching TikTok moving you towards your goals? How is binge watching TV shows moving you towards your goals? How is watching porn moving you towards your goals? How is playing video games moving you towards your goals? Realistically, none of these things are moving you towards your goals, but they're such fantastic alternatives for just doing what you need to do. And because they require no effort, because they feel so great, of course you're drawn to them. Of course you think, I don't have any motivation. The reality is, you don't have low motivation, you just have great alternatives. You just have things that you'd much prefer to do because they feel better and they're easier. So no wonder you choose them. Now, what is this actually doing to us? Because if you remember earlier when I talked about the rat with zero dopamine that wouldn't cross the cage to eat the cheese, this is really what we have become. We've become the rat with no dopamine that doesn't want to cross the cage. And I'll explain to you how this works. So, here we are. If we think about ourselves just going about our day, it's a normal day. We wake up in the morning, right? This is our normal dopamine baseline. And what are we doing first thing in the morning? Well, maybe we're scrolling TikTok, right? We're going to get a huge spike of dopamine. And then, go about your day. Maybe you're sitting on the toilet, right? Time to check the news. Another bit of dopamine, right? And then we're on our way to work, and maybe we're playing some Candy Crush. By the way, you might think Candy Crush is dated. I was sitting next to someone on a plane yesterday. He was about 40 years old, and he was grinding Candy Crush. He played Candy Crush for 4 hours straight. So don't tell me Candy Crush is not a thing. Right, so you're playing Candy Crush on the train. Maybe you get to work and, you're on your way back from work and you play Candy Crush again, right? You get home and maybe you're watching some Netflix before bed. Another spike of dopamine. Throughout the day, you've got all these big hits of dopamine for effectively doing nothing, right? So what happens is your brain goes, you're getting crazy hits of dopamine. You're getting a lot of dopamine right now. This seems out of the ordinary. So what's going to happen is it's going to bring your dopamine baseline down. And as a consequence, to effectively balance out your dopamine levels. So you're going to start your day with a horrendous dopamine baseline just to counteract the fact that you're getting so much dopamine from these activities. So what happens is you just now have a whole lot less dopamine. So every time you try to do an activity, like the work, like the thing you're supposed to be doing, it's so much harder. Because your dopamine baseline is so low, right, it's going to effectively get to a point where it's down here. What does that look like? That looks like the rat. Nope. That looks like the rat in the cage. Because that is what you're becoming when you're constantly spiking that dopamine, is you're effectively bringing your dopamine baseline down to nearly zero and making it almost impossible to do the work. So when you say to yourself, I'm not motivated, you probably have zero dopamine because you're doing all these easy high dopamine activities, doing anything except for the work. So when we have a look at everything that I've just talked about that is contributing to increasing your motivation levels, right? All of this stuff is choosing short-term pain for long-term gain. Effectively, all of it is choosing short-term pain over long-term gain. But nearly every single person in society right now is choosing short-term gain over long-term pain. If we have a look at what do I mean short-term pain over long-term gain, this is what I'm talking about. Choosing these things, right? Choosing to watch TikTok, to play video games, to watch TV shows, to watch porn, whatever you're doing. This is the long-term pain. Having no dopamine, having no motivation to do anything, becoming the rat in the cage, not wanting to do anything, right? If we looked at, the energy levels, right? Choosing to not get any sleep, right? Short term, great, you get to do more stuff. Long term, I have less energy, right? Same with nutrition, choosing McDonald's all the time. Short term, tastes really good. Long term, low energy levels. Same with exercise. Choosing not to do exercise, short term you feel good, like you don't have to go for a run, great, right? That might make me feel temporarily better. I might not get that temporary loss of energy. But in the long term, I'm going to have less energy because I'm going to be a fat, lethargic bastard, right? Same with stimulants. Borrowing energy from the future, right? Choosing to take energy from tomorrow to have today. Short-term gain, I get more energy right now. Long-term pain, I'm stealing from tomorrow. I'm going to have less energy tomorrow. If you drink a lot of coffee, try stop it for 3 days. It'll honestly be hell. It felt like One of the worst hangovers of my life, getting coffee out. And I'd only been drinking it for 3 weeks, like 1 to 2 cups a day. And it destroyed me. But effectively, all of this comes down to choosing short-term pain over long-term gain. If we decided to eliminate all alternatives except for the work, short-term, I can no longer play PlayStation. I can no longer watch TV. I can no longer scroll TikTok. Short-term, very painful. All of these fun things that I love doing in my life, I can no longer do. Very, very painful. Long-term, very beneficial. If all you can do is work on that online business that's going to create that financial freedom for you, if all you can do is work on improving your health, then you're going to do it. And therefore, the long-term gain is I have financial freedom. I'm in great shape, right? Short-term pain, very painful. Long-term, a lot of gain, right? This is really the idea of delayed gratification. How much can we delay the gain? How much can we delay the gain that we get and take on the pain? How much pain can we take on now to benefit in the future? That's really what it is. But let me propose something to you here. Because this whole video, I've been telling you how to increase your motivation levels. But we actually have to ask ourselves this question. Why are we relying on motivation in the first place? Because if you rely on motivation, then this is the chain of actions that's going to lead to your goals. Let's say your goal is you're trying to build that online business. You're trying to create financial, time, location freedom, all that great stuff. To get that goal, to get that outcome, you would need to take the action that's going to get you there. This might be outreaching, this might be making content, this might be building your product, this might be setting up your store. All of these things are the action that's required to get you to that result. The only thing that is standing in the way of you getting this outcome is the action you take. However, because we're relying on motivation to actually start this chain of events, to actually start this action. Fundamentally, motivation is an emotion. Emotions aren't stable. They're not consistent. They come and go. So whilst we can increase the probability that we'll feel motivation, we'll feel motivated for doing a task, relying on an emotion is probably not a good long-term strategy. If we no longer require motivation to take the action to get the outcome, we're probably going to be in a better position than if we require a certain emotion to dictate the actions that we take. Because how often do you think, this person has accomplished so much because they do the work when they feel like it? That's probably not a statement that you've heard very often. More likely, you'll hear someone say, this person puts in the work day in, day out, regardless of how they feel, not because of how they feel. So we definitely need to ask ourselves that question. Should we actually be using motivation in the first place? Because fundamentally, if we can just eliminate motivation entirely as a prerequisite, as a reason for taking action, then we're much more likely to receive the outcome. Because the more variables that I add to this equation, the less likely you are to get to this outcome. The more things that I put in the way, the more obstacles there for you to get the outcome, the less likely you are of hitting it. So let's remove as many things as possible that are required to get this outcome. So how can we actually eliminate the necessity for motivation? Well, the first thing that we can do to not require motivation entirely is that we need to actually improve our environments. So if we think about creating the best possible environment to get us to our result, to our dream outcome, then we would probably create an environment that makes it more likely for us to take the action and less likely for us to not take the action or do the things that are going to move us towards our goals. If you think about it, if you use that frame of mind for thinking about how you can create the best possible environment, I think you will get very, very good outcomes in your environment setup. So I like this example here because I think it explains environment very well. Let's say you're trying to lose weight. You think, okay, I want to get in incredible shape. I want to be 10% body fat. I want to be jacked. I could be the next Mr. Olympia. The only thing stopping me is eating these goddamn cookies. I just can't stop eating cookies. Who's more likely to stick to their diet to get in shape? The person who puts a jar of cookies next to them on their desk every single day. They have to look at those cookies all the time. They have to exercise their motivation, their willpower not to eat the cookies. Or the person who doesn't have cookies in their house. They don't even have cookies in their country. They're in a cookie-free country. It's impossible for them to get cookies. Who's more likely to eat cookies? Who's more likely to fail on their diet and not get in insane shape, not become the next Mr. Olympia? It's probably going to be the guy that eats cookies all the time. He's probably going to be more likely to eat the damn cookies. But if you don't have these cookies in your environment, you're going to be a lot better off. Now, why am I using the cookie example? Well, think about this, right? These things in your environment, these are your cookies, right? If you look at the real estate on your home screen on your phone, what does it look like? If I went to your phone right now, if I had a look at the home screen on your phone, what is there? Do you have Instagram there, and you have TikTok there, and you have Candy Crush there, and you have Clash of Clans there, and you have all of these things that are your cookies that are sitting on your desk, sitting on your home screen. Then I go to your laptop and you have, video games on your laptop where you're supposed to be doing work. You have all of these cookies staring right at you all the time. Of course it's going to be harder for you to do the things that are going to move you towards your goal, to take the action to move you towards your goal. Because at the end of the day, we don't necessarily want to be more motivated. We just want to achieve our goals, right? So why don't we do things that make it more likely for us to achieve our goals? So let's remove these cookies from our environment. Let's remove the distractions completely. Let's get them out of our lives, because these things are the things that are holding us back. If these aren't in your environment, this person right here, who's just choosing to do the work, isn't necessarily using any willpower. They don't need to, because there's no other options. The only thing there for them to do is the work, because they've removed all the cookies from their environment. So you need to do the same thing. Remove the cookies from your environment. These are your cookies. I didn't realize I had them here. These are your cookies, right? Let's get rid of them. Get rid of the TV. Get rid of the PlayStation. Get rid of all the distracting shit on your phone. If you eliminate all of these things from your environment, it is going to be so easy for you to just take the actions to get you towards your goals, and you're not going to need a crazy amount of motivation or anything. The next thing we can do is we can actually set up routines. We can have routines in place so that you don't actually need motivation or willpower or any of that stuff to get work done. You're living life on autopilot, but it actually gets you closer to your goals. See, most of the time we're not actively making decisions and choices about what we want to do. We wake up and we're basically on autopilot for 90% of the day. That is most of us. And we can say it's a good thing or a bad thing. I reckon rather than judging it, we just use it to our advantage. If we have this inbuilt autopilot feature that we're using most of the day, then why don't we just autopilot towards success, towards our goals, rather than away from our goals? Because the issue is, most of us are on autopilot, but we're on autopilot towards destruction, right? Away from our goals, towards distraction, things we don't want. If we look at two routines, right? This is routine A. This is basically everyone's routine right now, right? There are a few exceptions to this, but most people will wake up and instantly they know when I wake up, I reach into the side drawer and I pick up my phone and I start scrolling TikTok. And then I might go to the bathroom and I might start scrolling the news. And then maybe I actually go to work or I do some work. And then lunchtime rolls around, boom, junk food, right? And then, before bed, you might eat some more junk food. And then while we're eating our dinner, we're probably playing something or watching Netflix. And then right before bed, we watch some porn and then boom, go to bed. And this is our autopilot. This is just what we do throughout the day. We're very much trained this way. We know that as soon as we wake up, well, for the last 20 days, all I've done is scroll TikTok when I wake up. So why would it be any different? Why don't I just keep doing that, right? And then I know that every time I go to the toilet, I watch the news. And every time I eat food, I'm eating junk food. And then when I'm eating dinner, I'm watching Netflix. And then when I'm in bed, right before bed, I watch porn, right? That is an autopilot system. What if we had an autopilot system that just gets you towards your goals? What if when you wake up, I wake up and for the last 20 days, everything I've done is just meditate. Like, not everything I've done. I wake up and the first thing I do is meditate, right? And then after I meditate, I know I do the biggest task that's going to move me towards my goals. If I'm, trying to build a business, I do the biggest task that's going to move my business forward. And then it gets to, a few hours after I've done my biggest task, and I know, boom, I go to the gym. And then after I go to the gym, I know, all right, it's time to get back to work. And then I know, all right, it's time for a healthy meal. And then after a healthy meal, I can unwind. And then after I unwind, I can go to bed. You can live this on autopilot, and you're just going to move towards your goals and live a pretty happy life. You can just live this on autopilot, and you would just run away from your goals at lightning speed and live a pretty miserable life, because you're getting short-term gain but a lot of long-term pain. Here, this is a lot of short-term pain but a lot of long-term gain. If we can build a system like this, if we can build a routine to live on autopilot, this will move us towards our goals. This doesn't require any form of motivation. There's a concept known as habit stacking, which is where after you complete one activity, you follow it by the other. We do this subconsciously, regardless of what it is. Your habit stack right now might be wake up, then TikTok. Toilet, then news. Right? Dinner, then Netflix. Right? It's a habit stack. But what if you created a habit stack which is like wake, then meditate. Meditate, then gym. Big task. Big task, then gym. Gym, then work. Work, then healthy food. Healthy food, then unwind. Unwind, then bed. You're proceeding one habit with another. And if you created a habit stack which was only moving you towards your goals, moving the big needle forward, you would get some crazy results. Realistically, if you just set up this routine and just did it for 30 days, you're going to completely reset your brain. Your brain is no longer going to be thinking wake up, then TikTok. It's going to start thinking wake up, then meditate. And if you can start creating momentum and getting these habits in order, big things are coming. If you guys do want help removing these big things, trying to remove the bad habits in your life, trying to cut out those digital distractions, get your time back, move towards your goals, then I can help you out with that. There is a link in the description below. I don't mind if you click on it or not, but if you are struggling with these things, I know I can help you out. So if that's what you want, then click the link in the description below. Otherwise, that was the video. If you did like the video, then please give it a like, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.